Money's greatest intrinsic value, and this can't be overstated, is its ability to give you control over your time. Spending money to show people how much money you have is the fastest way to have less money. Things that have never happened before happen all the time. Planning is important, but the most important part of every plan is to plan on the plan, not going according to plan. Controlling your time is the highest dividend money pays. Napoleon's definition of a military genius was the man who can do the average thing when all those around him are going crazy. Independence to me doesn't mean you'll stop working. It means you only do work you like with people you like at the times you want for as long as you want. Saving is the gap between your ego and your income. Doing something you love on a schedule you can't control can feel the same as doing something you hate. Progress happens too slowly to notice, but setbacks happen too quickly to ignore. I love Voltaire's observation that history never repeats itself. Man always does. Growth is driven by compounding, which always takes time. Destruction is driven by single points of failure, which can happen in seconds, and loss of confidence, which can happen in an instant. Nothing is as good or as bad as it seemed. Savings can be created by spending less. You can spend less if you desire less, and you will desire less if you care less about what others think of you. Bill Gates once said, "Success is a lousy teacher. It seduces smart people into thinking they can't lose." To grasp why people bury themselves in debt, you don't need to study interest rate. You need to study the history of greed, insecurity, and optimism. Using your money to buy time when options has a lifestyle benefit few luxury goods can compete with. You are one person in a game with 7 billion other people and infinite moving parts. The accidental impact of actions outside of your control can be more consequential than the ones you consciously take. Risk is what's left over when you think you've thought of everything. Everything has a price, but not all prices appear on labels. Plan to survive reality. Future filled with unknown is everyone's reality. Optimism sounds like a sales pitch. Pessimism sounds like someone trying to help you. One of the most powerful ways to increase your savings isn't to raise your income. It's to raise your humility. Richard Feynman, the great physicist, once said, "Imagine how much harder physics would be if electrons had feelings." Well, investors have feelings. But there's only one way to stay wealthy, some combination of frugality and paranoia. The end of history illusion is what psychologists call a tendency for people to be keenly aware of how much they've changed in the past, but to underestimate how much their personalities, desires, and goals are likely to change in the future. The only way to be wealthy is to not spend the money that you do have, It's not just the only way to accumulate wealth, it's the very definition of wealth. The hardest financial skill is getting the goalpost to stop moving. Be careful who you praise and admire. Be careful who you look down upon and wish to avoid becoming. And since you can build wealth without a high income, but have no chance of building wealth without a high savings rate, it's clear which one matters more. Therefore, focus less on specific individuals and case studies and more on broad patterns. A good definition of an investing genius is the man or woman who can do the average thing when all those around them are going crazy. Tails drive everything. Expecting things to be bad is the best way to be pleasantly surprised when they're not, which, ironically, is something to be optimistic about. Happiness, as it said, is just results minus expectation. We tell ourselves stories to fill in the gaps of what are effectively blind spots. You need short-term paranoia to keep you alive long enough to exploit long-term optimism. Compounding doesn't rely on earning big returns. Merely good returns sustained uninterrupted for the longest period of time, especially in times of chaos and havoc, will always win. The correct lesson to learn from surprises is that the world is surprising. This is true in personal finance, where you're told to have a 6-month emergency fund and save tens of your salary. Failure can be a lousy teacher because it seduces smart people into thinking their decisions were terrible when sometimes they just reflect the unforgiving realities of risk. Intelligence is not a reliable advantage in a world that's become as connected as ours has, but flexibility is. Everything in finance is data within the context of expectations. There is the old pilot quip that their jobs are hours and hours of boredom punctuated by moments of sheer terror. Some lessons have to be experienced before they can be understood. There's an iron law in economics. Extremely good and extremely bad circumstances rarely stay that way for long because supply and demand adapt in hard-to-predict ways. Having a gap between what you can technically endure versus what's emotionally possible is an overlooked version of room for error. A plan is only useful if it can survive reality, and a future filled with unknowns is everyone's reality. In fact, the most important part of every plan is planning on your plan not going according to plan. Now let me show you how this applies to you. When thinking about room for error in a forecast, it is tempting to think that potential outcomes range from you being just right enough to you being very, very right.